Scholars, Alex Alonso and FG, here to bring you guys another banger. And I'm with the East Side General. Posted up. What's going on, FG?
Man, what's cracking, man? I see that tight ass hat you got on over there, man. That thing's sticking, man. What's happening with it?
Yeah, man. I just decided to throw this thing on. I think I wore this once on an episode of the Gangster Chronicles that I did back in 2020. That was
That's that
2020.
real shit back there. See, a lot of them youngsters, man, won't even have a clue about that hat, though. You know, they don't even know their history, and that's a part of the problem, man. Most of us don't know their history, but yeah, that hat tight. But what's going on with it?
Hey, I think a lot of more people are aware of this hat because the designer of this hat he went old school. He brought it back, and a lot of people are tapping in with it. And if you see OGs out there all the time now throwing it on, and the youngsters is like, damn, that hat is tight. So they starting to get a little bit of history on the clothing, on the attire of the. I guess these hats go back to either the late '70s, definitely the early '80s is when I
No
started
doubt,
seeing
no
them.
doubt. Yeah.
I think I first saw a golf hat. I think 1982 or 1983 was the first time I ever seen a golf hat. They,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
may have existed a couple years before that.
Right, but same for me, you know what I mean? 82, I was 9 years old, so around 10, 11, when I started, basically hitting corners on my bike and stuff like that, I started to see the homies. They was really rocking them back then, so you know what I mean? That was the difference. You knew how to differentiate who was who back then, you know what I mean? So the homies that had the attire on, you knew that they was a part of the thing, but at the same time, now it's like, it's almost like the Taliban, man. Everybody dress alike, so you don't know who's who. That make it even more dangerous.
Yeah, well, a lot of the gang style and the gang attire has went mainstream, and to a certain degree, that's cool because it just shows you that what people do in the streets is loved all over the world. But then at the same time, people's co-opting the culture and not really understanding what comes with it. But the first time I seen a golf hat like this, I believe I was going down Pico. I was going down Pico on a bus as a kid, and I think I was passing somewhere on the past La Brea, past I don't know what the cross street was, and I looked out the window. I saw about 4 or 5 gangsters, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Wow, look at they was all in Levi's, creased up with the golf hats on." And I was like, "Look at them gangsters." I was an innocent kid. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was about probably 12, and yeah, I was on that RTD bus, man, just going all over the city whenever I wanted to, without no supervision, man, enjoying my life.
No, no doubt. That's how it was back then, man. And unfortunately, man, like I say, um, the culture, it changed over the years, man. Even though now, Alex, a lot of these dudes out here, they rocking designer. You know what I mean? Real thugs. And they rocking the Gucci and they rocking the, the Fendi and the designer wear. And at the end of the day, man, I don't have no word one way or the other. You know what I mean? I knew dudes wouldn't wear chucks and khakis and white t-shirts for the rest of their life. So, it is what it is, man. The evolution of the attire is something that probably been in effect since, what, the 40s and 50s. You know what I mean? Because I think
Definitely.
Al Capone and them wore suits and shit. You know what I mean? And even probably the homies in the 70s, they wore suits and brims and hard shoes. You know what? So it evolved over the years.
Yeah, wasn't it when you had the club popping over there down in was it Lakewood? When you where
No,
was
I
it?
was Fullerton. I was Fullerton we was
Fullerton.
in.
You
Yeah.
had the homies dressing up in what, gators and silk suits or something?
No, no doubt they wasn't necessarily silk, but I mean, well, really, it was everything. You know what I mean? And I can't honestly say, and the homies will agree that I was definitely a trendsetter on the east side of Compton when it came to dressing. You know what I mean? When I got the club, it was matter of fact, it was Ted Dozier at the Century Club. That had a chat with me. He said, "Man, I heard y'all down there doing a lot of fighting, man." I'm like, homies, getting drunk. He said, "This what you do." He said, "You gotta, get a clientele that dress, with slacks, with shirts on, with ties." I'm like, "Well, where I'm gonna get that clientele from? I'm not that kind of dude." He said, "No, you don't go get the clientele. You just change. You make your homies and get your homies to start dressing like this, and you lead by example." You know what I mean? So, man, when I start wearing, slacks and ties and, like you say, gator boots and, and the things of that nature, it made the next homie want to do it. The next thing we got a club full of brims and, and so I definitely was an intricate part of that east side dressing up, man, and getting out and the females putting on heels and, going to, spend money on nice dresses and things of that nature, man. So, it was a good thing. It was definitely a gangster party, man, but we looked real good doing it. You know what I mean?
That guy from the Century Club, was he just a straight up business person, or was he from the streets as well? What was his background?
Ted Dozier is basically I met him through the Bradleys. You know what I mean? So he was I believe at that time he might have been married to a Bradley if I ain't mistaken, or dating one, but he was close to the Bradley family and matter of fact he's related. Ain't no close, he's related. So he had a love for me and affection, through family ties. But back then the Century Club was the biggest thing, going back then. So he was just trying to lace my boots, let me know he saw what I was doing, and trying to give me some advice on making my shit better.
I remember the Century Club was the first club I ever heard of charging $20 to get in. At that time, that was a lot of money. Like you paying $20 to get into a club, and
No doubt.
that was their price. You remember that?
Hell yeah. Man, come on, man. I was a staple at the Century Club, man. You know what I mean? Park out front, VIP. You know what I mean? I even had the little VIP card where I think you pay 50, you know what I mean? And a month or something like that. And you don't got to wait in line, man. But the Century Club, Alice, was an experience. Like you say, the stars went there back then. Celebrities went there back then, definitely had it popping. It definitely was something that, grew us up by being around other grown men, dressed as grown men, acting as grown men. I'm a young cat, 22, 23 years old, but you also, in those trenches, in those clubs, even though we dressed up, you was running into the main streets, you was running into the grape streets, you was running into the 6 O's, so it was a dynamic that dudes that didn't get out the hood, they didn't know, but at the same time, man, it was that Century Club and a lot of other clubs, man. It was we had a great time at it.
Yeah, man, that Century Club was also mentioned by Dre, and I forget what song he mentioned it in, but he shouted out the Century Club in one of his early songs back in the day. But whatever happened to it? How do why do clubs end in the first place? If a club is so popping and everybody loves it, it seems like clubs have an expiration, and that expiration date usually comes soon.
Well, it's a couple different factors. One factor being, on my level, um, dudes would get into it and the the owner was in jeopardy of losing an entertainment license, so they would ask you to go find another spot to do your club. If you didn't have no ownership or if you didn't have a certain lease. With situations like the Century Club, it went on so long and so long. It could be a simple situation as the owner want more now. He see you making hundreds of thousands of dollars at his spot. He agreed to a certain lease amount. Now he see how much you making, so he wanted to renegotiate the terms. And the terms could be like, hold on, bro, we had a deal, and you may not agree to the terms of what he want to renegotiate as, kind of like a landlord, want to go up on your rent, so sometimes it's those situations, and at the same time when it came to, but I can't say when it came to Ted Dozier, every spot they did, they had celebrities, they had the poppin'est crowds, you know what I mean? They had the high end people who, didn't mind paying to get in, didn't mind paying for drinks, wasn't trying to start no trouble because, like you said, they had money and things like that. But it'd be a lot of different situations. I know in a couple of my clubs when I had a Savannah West we had it on a Thursday night. It's right across the street from the Century Club in the ABC building. And oh man, during the homie birthday party, some words got exchanged for a few from big old. We sued it. I'm talking about sued it. Big old fight broke out. You know what I mean? And so the owner told me, hey man, listen, man, and the owner was black. He said, listen, man, I'm the only black owner of a club in Beverly Hills, man. It was Century City, He said, man, I can't afford to. I said, I feel you, no worries, So I packed up and moved to another spot, because I made a spot hot. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's that, you know what I mean? So, it's different factors, but at the same time, man, ain't nothing wrong with a change of scenery as well.
So if a bunch of, let's say, 5 or 6 dudes pulled up and they was wearing Chucks, creased Levi's, and some golf hats, they wouldn't be able to get into the club at these types of clubs, would they?
No doubt, you know what I mean? And it got to the point to where you couldn't even get into my spot like that, just based on, man, you got to realize, I learned a few things doing the nightclub business. I used to always want to have little rappers come in and perform. Rappers is the worst people to come in and perform because you bring in the rap crowd. You know what I mean? You bring in the hood when you bring the road dogs in, when you bring, a badass from Long Beach in, when you bring these dudes in, yeah, they got hit records and things of that nature at the time. But the element of people you bringing is straight up gangbangers. They not trying to dress up or nothing. They just trying to come. So the thing, what I learned is you want to do the kind of lightweight R&B rap dudes, because they bring a different crowd, and it's a lot I learned doing that club thing. But at the same time, dress code, man, if people dress right, people less like want to fight. Alex, if you and your Stacy's, you and your Romeos, you and your Gator boots, you ain't trying to fight, homie. You know what I mean? But if you got on some Nike Cortez or some Jordans, you get drunk, you're gonna want to start some shit. So that was the ideology of just making sure. And I took a lot of flack, I took a lot of heat, a lot of homies talk shit. FG is like that, homie. You ain't gonna let me in, homie. I just came from the studio, or I just got off the plane. I heard that shit a million times. I just came from the studio, I just got off the plane. Man, I just wanna. And depending on who it was, Alex, it was certain dudes I would let it because I knew that they knew how to conduct themselves. But it was also dudes I know that y'all came to start some shit, man. So, I took the heat, motherfuckers gonna talk their little shit. You wasn't gonna do nothing, but motherfuckers gonna talk their little shit. I had a few people mad at me over the years.
So they went back to the hood and they was all like, "Fuck FG, man. He wouldn't
That's
let me in.
exactly what they
He
did.
wouldn't even let me in the spot, man. Fuck that bitch ass mother
Hey,
effer."
hey, that's just exactly what they probably did, man. But at the same time, it was a business, man, and I was trying to conduct it as one. I was trying to provide something for the homies, but at the same time, man, running a business, when you got homies involved, it's one of the hardest things to do, and I did all right, you know what I mean?
His head got all big now that he got some clubs and shit and don't
Right,
even want to
right,
look out for the
right. Yeah,
homies.
all that. But Alex, one time I can't say, one of my proudest moments was I rented out the Century Club one time myself. It was a Labor Day. The place was available. I rented out the Century Club, man, and we did it big over there. The thing about it was the expenses were so high. I mean, the party was cracking, it made me feel good based on because the Century Club when I was coming up was like our childhood club. That was to get to the Century Club, that was our thing. So for me to actually rent it out myself, have my security running the door, have my people collecting the money and things of this nature. It was for me, it was like a reward, like you can say something, damn, I think I made it. Thing about it was my expenses was so high. I didn't make no money. You know what I mean? I didn't lose any, but I didn't make any. But to be honest with you, that was an experience, man, that I can't say I wouldn't take back.
Yeah, man, the profit margins on that is pretty small. I guess if you got to own like 10 clubs to really, earn some income off of it where you could probably survive and pay some bills. One club probably ain't going to do it.
Well, no, that's not true, because you got to think about it. Alice, one club can do it and a small club can do it at that. You know what I mean? Me and you right now to, do a streets and party, a streets and scholars party, and we go rent us a venue. If we can rent the venue for cheap, you got to think about it. $20 ain't nothing nowadays. You do 500 people at $20, man, do the math, and that's one night. So you pay your DJ, you pay your security, and pay whatever rent you're gonna pay on the spot. And it's just about when the people come, providing a good time, making sure everybody's safe as far as things of that nature. Man, people will keep coming. So over time, some of them clubs out there doing, pulling 8, 9, 10,000 a week. You know what I mean? And it's not hard to do if you build your foundation. You build your name up and you build your brand. So, but now since we in Cali then got so it's easy to go out of town. Like we could pull up in Ohio and do a streets and scholars party and clean up. But this Cali, LA, the lowest of our friends is Hollywood now. You know what I mean? They want VIP. They want to pop bottles. It's just different now. But back then, it was easy to get some bread.
And then you just go to Costco and you buy up a bunch of alcohol and
Right,
you had
right,
the
right.
homegirl be the bartender and you say, F the liquor license, right?
Man, you ain't even going to Costco, man. You getting the boosters, you know what I mean? Bring them bottles up to the barbershop, man, and you getting it like that, man. So, it's all kind of ways to cut corners, but hey, a hustle is a hustle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, for sure, man. I know we got a couple things we wanted to talk about, man, and we don't got a whole lot of time, man. So this might be a short one, but um, did you tap in with these three San Antonio cops that they charged them with murder after they shot I would say a mentally disturbed woman that she just wanted to go inside her house. She ran in her house, and the cops followed her and they aired her out.
Yeah, yeah, man. That was tragic. For the people who haven't seen this, man, they got to go check this out. On social media. Google per se. But hey, Al, or Streets and Scholars. Hey, Alex, check this out, man. She was having a mental crisis. I mean, she wasn't violent, bro. She went in her house. They followed her in her house. She threw something at them. Well, she threw something at the window, while they were trying to come through her window, Then she grabbed a hammer, but you can tell. See, that's the problem with what I'm talking about with law enforcement. You could tell she wasn't on the regular. You could tell she wasn't just I ain't gonna say she wasn't a regular person, but you could tell she was going through something at the moment mentally. And cops are trained, man. They trained and trained and trained to diagnose this. You know what I mean? So they handled that situation all the way wrong, man. And at the end of the day, they went in her pad and aired her out. Yeah, she was vandalizing something per se, but this is a mental health, crisis she was having, and they just dropped the ball on it.
Yeah, man, I do have a little clip here I want to play from the local news down there in San Antonio that gives it a little bit of background. Take a listen to this.
Breaking news first at 10. Three San Antonio police officers charged with murder after they reportedly shot and killed a woman on the southwest side.
In just the last 40 minutes, Police Chief William McManus announcing the arrest of these three officers, Sergeant Alfred Flores and officers Alejandro and Nathaniel Villalobos. The chief says they have been suspended without pay.
Now, just moments ago, McManus held a news conference saying the shooting was not consistent with SAPD's policies and training.
SAPD also releasing video of this morning's shooting that show what unfolded at that woman's apartment. And we want to warn you, the video you are about to see is disturbing.
You ain't got no warrant. Oh, okay, watch out. Go, get him. Hey, watch out.
KENS 5's Alicia Nieves is following this story for us tonight. She joins us live now from Public Safety Headquarters with these latest developments. Alicia?
It was a swift decision by SAPD's homicide unit in a matter of hours after reviewing the body camera footage from this morning's shooting. All three officers who fired their guns are now facing murder charges. Take a look. This all started shortly after midnight.
All right, we got the point there. AFG. What's surprising to me is that it only took a matter of days before the San Antonio prosecutors decided to charge them with murder. We're starting to see this a little bit more now. Remember back in the days, it would take like a year and a half for an investigation to take place. But now we knew that year and a half investigation was a bunch of BS because it don't take a year and a half to look at body cam or to take the statements or to look at the evidence, to look at the footage, to make a determination on whether or not something was murder or not. And obviously, according to the police chief in this town, they did not follow proper protocol, and they're getting all charged with murder, man. And I'm kind of happy to see that it doesn't take forever and a day to charge cops now.
No doubt, bro. In this situation, like you say, man, she was having a crisis. They could have went in. I mean, they could have really went in and tackled her. You know what I mean? They could have got a hold of her. At the end of the day, they probably still wouldn't arrested her after they evaluate her. Probably sent her on, a psychiatric review. But they chose to air her out, man. And also with these officers charged, one of them is a sergeant. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, Sarge, you're not even leading by example. You're not even leading your troops by example. You want to be shoot first, ask questions last, and that's lawless, So yeah, like you say, Alex, it don't take no year, it don't take no money, it don't take nothing. They did it swift and quick. I'm surprised they charged them fast, So, but if they do it more, Alex, this may rein in some of the bullshit that these police be on. If they start doing it, if they keep it consistent, bro, you'll be surprised at how many these officers gonna start thinking first before they pull that trigger.
Yeah, the problem is it's not consistent across the country. There's probably some cities that are more quick to charge their cops, and there's other cities that definitely going to tell their rank and file, man, don't worry about what they're doing down in San Antonio, boys. We don't do that here. So,
Right. No,
you
no
know,
doubt.
still do your thing. San Antonio's a different animal than over here, so don't be persuaded, don't be swift, because these are local charges. These are state charges. It's not until when the feds start coming in and start charging cops like this consistently, then maybe, just maybe, we'll see some changes in the way policing is. But I'm not convinced that an arrest like this is really going to change anything, FG.
Well, it's definitely going to change something in San Antonio. Definitely going to change something down in Texas. And I'm surprised it happened in Texas, though, because usually, they shoot them out down there in Texas, but at the same time, I believe it's going to change. Your supervisor at the police department can come tell you anything you want. Same as us, Alex, in any profession that we do at a job. Your supervisor can come tell you to do anything, but you're going to say, hold on, man, that my safety is involved in that. I'm not doing that. Or you got a decision to make, like I carry a CDL hazmat, my supervisor or my manager can't tell me to do certain shit based on, that ain't, I know that ain't cool for me, so some of these officers, my point in saying this is some of these officers is going to start saying, hold on, no, I'm not finna shoot first, because I'm not finna risk going to jail or my career or feed my family just trying to shoot somebody or be a hero. Yeah, if somebody got a gun pointed at, certain situation, but a situation exactly like this, I guarantee you it's a whole lot of cops that's going to say, nah, man, I'm not finna pull that trigger just based on, because they are charging dudes in certain states and certain area. I think it's going to be, some of them going to be mindful. I think the one is just gun ho. They going to be who they are and keep doing what they doing. But I believe some cop somewhere, man, going to take heed of this and be like, man, you know what? I'm back up a little bit.
Yeah, man. The three cops charged, when I just say their names, are Sergeant Alfred Flores, Nathaniel Villalobos, and Eleazer Alejandro. And the woman that was killed, Melissa Perez, she did not have a gun, but we got to at least say what she had in her hand right before they started shooting her, even though she was inside her apartment. First, she threw a candle. And
Right.
then they're trying to say that she had a hammer in her hand, and that's why they decided to air her out. But she wasn't even anywhere within reaching distance with the officers. But I'm sure they're going to argue that she had a hammer and she could have threw it at one of the cops, and the cop could have got knocked out, and then she could have picked up their gun. I mean, they're going to have a whole scenario of what the problem with a mentally unhinged woman with a hammer in her hand could pose. But I'm thinking, man, if a woman if a female has a hammer in her hand and she's 10, 20 feet away, a trained officer should know how to deal with that type of person.
No doubt. But at the same time, Alex, they took body shots. They took kill shots. I think they only hit her twice, knocked her down. You can't disable a person. In this situation, you can't shoot a person, and they could have shot her in the foot and she would have fell on the ground screaming. I mean, you know what I mean? But to kill a person, I mean, I know they train to, shoot where they shoot, but at the same time, man, you got to take something into consideration, man. She had a hammer. They was ducking. I was looking at the looks on their faces, the leaning that they doing. You would have thought somebody was shooting back at them the way they, from their body language, that I was looking at when they started shooting. Dude face tuned up like he had some bullets coming back at him. Bro, she had a hammer in her hand. You know what I mean? So I believe some of these cops, like you be half-ass scared, don't know how to handle a situation. Just because they police don't mean, pass the test to be a police don't mean, they got no experience on handling shit in the street, But I believe, like you said, they got charged, man, but they did, I believe they did murder this woman.
Yeah, I think they're a lot of these officers, unfortunately, are trained to shoot center mass. They're not trained, and maybe that's the problem with law enforcement. Cops are not trained to stop a person or to injure a person. They're trained to neutralize the person, which means deadly force.
Right.
And and I don't know if it's a good idea to train them to shoot two different kind of ways. They're going to argue saying, hey, we can't train our officers to assess the situation and figure out if they're going to shoot to kill or shoot to injure. But in this situation, shooting to kill was absolutely out of line. It's out of place. And because it was a mental health crisis, they got to teach these officers how to identify someone that has a mental health issue. They probably just thought she was a thug, a criminal, because they received a phone call. And at that point, they don't care who's got a mental health issue. And that's another issue that they're going to have. And I'm sure when they go to trial, they're going to blame the way they were trained by San Antonio. They're going to say that we're trained to shoot like this. We're trained to react this way. We're not trained to injure. We're not trained to shoot in the foot. We're not trained to sit there and let somebody swing a hammer in their hand. So even though I believe that what they did was wrong, they're gonna blame the whole thing on the city of San Antonio.
Well, you know they can, but that city in San Antonio did act swift on this, Alex. I don't know if you could fault them on, how they, conducted the situation, and two, probably let off some of that blame on the city. They probably, that's probably why they acted swift like that, So, these dudes finna find themselves where they already found themselves, on the other end of the stick now. You know what I mean? So now you guys finna be criminals, and now you guys finna have a record. Now you guys finna have a conviction of some sort, even if it's manslaughter. You know what I mean? You're gonna see, homie, that you're not bigger than the law. Don't get me wrong, like you said, it might not entice every police in every city, but at the same time, the more it happen, Alex, the more these people gonna start thinking about some of their actions.
Well, we're gonna need the feds to come in to really get law enforcement to change, because most of these cops don't fear state law, but when them feds come in, that ain't no joke. But I want to play this quick clip because this has been going on for a long time, where cops have shot people that were going through mental health crises because they had a weapon, a non-fatal weapon in their hand. Well, I don't want to say non-fatal because you can't kill someone with a hammer, but a weapon where trained officers are able to do something. But this situation here in Los Angeles back in the day, 1979, I feel is this is one of the first shootings probably in our lifetime that received media attention here in Los Angeles, that the officers were out of line, but they didn't get charged because it was 1979. Let me play this clip. This is the Eula Love shooting, which happened not too far from where you used to live when you was a kid, FG, right there in the Athens area.
Oh, okay.
Let me play this clip. This is 1979.
Which was it? Excessive use of force by Los Angeles police or understandable reaction in self-defense? The answers involve larger questions about police practices, news organizations, and the responsibility of citizens. Terry Drinkwater reports.
Last January, a black woman named Eula Love was shot by two policemen. They had been called to her home by the gas company because she had hit the utilities bill collector with a shovel. Mrs. Love was overdue with her $69 payment. She also threatened the officers with a knife. They fired 12 times and killed her. Her neighbors in Watts couldn't believe it.
They could have subdued this lady without using the weapons that they used. They could have took her alive. Plain and simple, because it was two cops against one lady with a butcher knife.
In the months since, blacks and liberals have become intensely critical of what they charge is excessive use of force by the Los Angeles Police Department. The American Civil Liberties Union says that in the last 4 years, officers here have shot over 300 people, killing nearly half of them.
We're no longer going to stand aside and let the police department shoot our people down in cold-blooded murder.
But the district attorney investigated the Eula Love shooting and decided not to prosecute the officers, calling their action justifiable homicide in their own self-defense. Police Chief Darrell Gates.
I think it's about time that we say something about the responsibility of people in this community not to solve their problems with violence, because violence begets violence. And that's what Eula Love did on this occasion.
But Mayor Bradley's police commission concluded just the opposite, saying the officers were premature in drawing their weapons. Chief Gates says that finding devastated morale in his department. And in defense of his men, the chief has gone on the attack, suggesting there's a conspiracy against those who uphold law and order. In a closed-circuit TV address to the department, he placed the blame generally on the media.
Okay, does that sound familiar, FG? I mean, this was like 40 years ago. And
Yeah, but you know, Daryl Gates was something else, though, man.
yeah, man. But look, 1979, Eula Love. Here we are, 2023. Melissa Perez in San Antonio, and it is almost the exact same thing. The only difference is we weren't talking about mental health in 1979.
Right.
You know, if you go back and look at all the Eula Love stories, you're not going to find the word she was going through a mental health crisis. But look, here we are, 40 years later, and we finally having that conversation, but the cops are still killing them, man.
No doubt. You're absolutely right, homie. But you know, at the same time, it's gonna take up it's gonna take more than just talk. Like dude said back then in '79, man, we need to stop this and we need to stop that. And like you said, still haven't stopped. You know what I mean? So that means whatever we doing ain't working. You know, so at the same time, man, you know, like I say, do they care enough, even care enough? You know, in this situation, the officers was charged, you know what I mean? So I can't take nothing from the San Antonio Police Department. You know, they did what they felt was necessary. They did what they felt was right. You know what I mean? It definitely was murder. So I can only go by right now San Antonio, but we have seen this situation, Alex, you know, 100 times where officers wasn't charged. So we definitely got to see if the tone change. You know, if San Antonio sets some kind of precedent with other, you know, law enforcement agencies. Of course they won't with all, but like I say, I believe some officers will see this and man be like, man, you know, it's getting hard on the yard. We can't just do what we used to do. Same thing for street dudes. You can't just do what you used to do. You know what I mean? So you got to simmer down a little bit in order to make it.
Well, we did see that the sheriff deputy in the Twyman shooting that happened over there in the APs in the Athens Park neighborhood, where the sheriff went to his trunk, pulled out another rifle, and continued shooting at someone that he already shot. He got charged, but it took about 2 years to charge him, and he was charged under Gascon, who's more sensitive to these topics. Under Jackie Lacey, no one was getting charged. So it also depends on who's your district attorney. Does your
No
district
doubt.
attorney care about these officer involved shootings and is willing to hold police accountable? Or do you have a district attorney like Jackie Lacey, who in 8 years, I think, charged one cop because it was so obvious, but there were at least a couple dozen cases where she could have charged and she didn't. So, you know, it's not just, it's also prosecutors from these counties willing to charge their cops.
No doubt. But at the same time, like you say, you know, I'm gonna tell you when you're talking about, you know, guys like Gascons versus, you know, people like Lacey, you know, that all comes in the vote, Alex. You know, and a lot of people, you know, couldn't tell you two things about neither one of them when they go to vote, you know, and that's about being conscious and about doing your homework on what you bringing in. You know, so that's a whole nother topic. But at the same time, that's really how it starts. You know, having somebody in there in office who you know will shake up the police force, or will give them a run for their money, or will charge them if they slipping. You know what I mean? But at the same time, you know, people so busy living their lives and paying these high ass bills and doing the thing they doing, man. When the shit don't affect them, you know, it's like they don't care as much, you know, because it don't affect them, you know, until something happens. Then you want, you know, somebody to act on it. You want these officers charged, but you never took the time to, when you went to vote, you just scratched in a name you heard or just didn't even vote, you know, on city elections, you know, and that hurt in the long run.
Yeah, man, it all matters on that DA also, and hopefully we get more DAs across this country that will not accept police officers just killing people that don't need to be killed. Melissa Perez definitely did not need to be killed. They could have just waited outside and called in some professionals and got her under control without using deadly force. So we'll see, but hey, there's this story going around from Villa Rica, Georgia, where the Georgia police in Villa Rica were doing target practice, and apparently they were only using their black photograph for target practice, a photo of a black man with a beanie on holding a gun as target practice, and the chief of police in that town was being called racist. He definitely challenged that idea because he said we got signs of other people, of other races. We got white signs, we got Asian signs. It just so happened to be on that day we only had the black signs. Did you check out this crazy story?
Yeah, I checked it out, man. And like he said, he was kind of furious about people calling him and his department racist. He was like, I'm not going for that, and you know, but he also got to snitching too. Other departments, they have black, posters that they use for target practice. Law enforcement agencies around the country do it, and we also have Asian and we have whites, and you know what I mean. But for me, why put a you can have the same photo up there without a face on it. You know what I mean? You don't have to have a black face. You don't have to have a white face. You don't have to have an Asian face. You know what I mean? To get your point across of where you're trying to shoot at. But to be honest with you, man, this to me, I would declare it a form of racism just based on, look, man, y'all got a big black dude up there with a pistol and a beanie. And why you gotta have a beanie on? You know what I mean? He look, you know what I mean? And just the cold thing about it, to me, you know what I mean, makes them what I believe they actually intended to do. When you see this dude right here, this is our enemy. Subliminally, they were sending the message to their people that this is who you shoot. So that's how I took it.
Yeah, man. I'm curious to know if they do have other racial photos. How often do they use those? And if they use the black photos more often than the other photos, does that subconsciously get into the minds of these officers that that makes them more prone to shoot black folks when they're in the streets? And how many departments actually do this type of practice? We only learned about this because this department was dumb enough to post the stuff on Facebook. They have since deleted it. But they did defend it. The chief of police in Villa Rica, Georgia, is Michael Mansour. And my only question is, how does this tap into the unconscious mind of the officer that's out there on the streets that have to interface with black folks? And I bet on a psychological perspective, this does have an impact.
No doubt. You know what I mean? Like I say, listen, like I say, I don't think it's cool. You know what I mean? You got somebody named Pepe Powell down there on the thing, to say what race is it okay for to use for a target? You know what I mean? But definitely anything with black, especially when this conversation is going from coast to coast, from top to bottom in our country, and me personally, I believe they know exactly what they was doing. I believe if they do have other targets, I believe it. If you didn't have one right next to the other, I knew they believed that they could see that this was insensitive. You know what I mean? But I really believe that they didn't give a damn either.
Yeah, because if they got an Asian guy and they got a white guy, how come they don't have them all up there in different positions at the same time? They just got the black dude in every single position during this target practicing. So, hey, but I do understand. Well, one more thing I want to say. I do understand how realistic they want to make practicing. Their training and their shooting. And I've seen where they actually use like artificial intelligence, where they're actually going into rooms and buildings and they actually have reflections of people that pop out and things of that sort. So I do understand there's a need to make this training as realistic as possible as well, FG.
No doubt. But just what I was gonna say right here, Alex. Say if you did have an Asian photo up there. Say if you had a black poster up there. Say if you had a white poster up there, and say if you had a brown poster up there. These people in this department, when they go up there, just this what I would have wanted to know if I could have been a fly on the wall in a private setting. They go up there and say, listen, man, you pick a target, man, you do your thing, blah, blah, blah. If you had all those posters up there, I still believe in this situation that more cops will go to the other posting than their own. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, when you get to count bullets in these posters, I guarantee you there'd be more bullets in all the rest of them besides their own, bro. Just straight up. You know what I mean? If they had a chance to just walk up and pick your target, believe me, it wouldn't be their own. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, subconsciously, people are who they are and they're gonna be what they're gonna be. But at the same time, this right here, man, I believe even if they didn't have any, ill intentions out the gate, man, they knew this was insensitive, man. Then you posted on Facebook, I believe you knew what you was doing.
Yeah, they've since deleted their post. Let me just read what this article says here. NBC News says Villa Rica's chief of police, Michael Mansour, said the targets with the black men are used all over the state. I guess this is the part where you said he started switching on other departments. They're used all over the state for training, and that during the class, the department also used other targets depicting individuals who were white and Asian. They didn't have Latinos in there. The officer who posted the photos, who Mansour declined to identify, this is the Facebook post, mistakenly posted photos of only the black targets that were used. It's just an innocent mistake, but it was a mistake, the chief said. And I'm being very transparent and saying that we messed up, but at no time will I accept people telling me I'm racist or our department is a racist is a racist because we made a mistake. So that's their apology, FG. I don't think a lot of black folks is going to be cool with it, but I'm sure most of America will say, okay, he made an honest mistake, right?
Nah, I think most people gonna say he full of shit. You know, they knew what they was doing, but what's gonna happen? Nothing. They gonna get away with it. You know what I mean? So, hey, you know, but it do shines a light on, you know, what's going on over there, and so you know. But at the end of the day, like you say, Alex, only for the people in that town. You know, they gonna know that there's some if it's real or fake. You know what I mean? They know how they police officers conduct themselves in the community with black folks. So up until somebody black from that community comes say, you know what, I've dealt with these officers, man, they fair with, I'm not gonna buy it.
Yeah, man. And when he said all over the state they use these signs, I guess he's you know, Georgia. This is Georgia, man. This is the South, the deep South.
No doubt. Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that if that's what they're doing down in Georgia is using black targets. And we have since seen photos of other races. We haven't seen the white photos and we haven't seen the Asian ones. So as far as I'm concerned, they don't exist because they would have probably posted them and say, hey, look, we got other people, but I haven't seen them. I'm not saying they don't exist. I did a quick search.
Right.
I couldn't find them, man. So, all right. Hey, man, they you know, they're still arresting gang members. So for all you guys out there that are still in your hood hanging out, let me just show you this story from San Antonio. They arrested what about 12 or 13 dudes from a Hispanic gang in San Antonio. FG, did you see this story?
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay, let me see if I could play this clip of what they got going on up here in San Antonio. I mean, I'm not San Antonio, San Jose. Too many sand cities.
Yeah, I was finna say, yeah, we just talked about San Antonio. Yeah.
We got too many sand cities. Let me just
there's North Cali right here.
Let me let's see. Here we go. San Jose gang sweep from Fox 2. Here we go.
San Jose police multi-unit sweep has led to a dozen arrests. KTVU South Bay reporter Jesse Gary live tonight outside police headquarters with the details. And Jesse, some of those arrested are teenagers here.
Mike, the youngest, is just 16 years of age. A quarter of those arrested are juveniles. Investigators say all are accused of committing the worst, most violent crimes on the streets of San Jose until they were caught this past spring.
People who are committing violent felonies on the streets of San Jose, who are gang members, are taken into custody and put behind bars.
Thursday, San Jose police announcing a dozen alleged gang members have been caught. The suspects range in age from 22 down to as young as 16. 3 of the 12 are juveniles.
All of them are charged with violent felonies involving gang enhancement and involvement. The most serious of which, some of were gang-related attempted homicide, armed robberies, drug trafficking, gun possession, ammunition.
Police officials say their gang investigation unit, ghost assault unit, and special operations unit combined to track the dozen alleged criminals dating back to last fall. 9 are now in the Santa Clara County main jail, and the 3 juveniles are in the county's juvenile detention center.
They're looking for connection, like friends, family, that perhaps is not present in their home.
This is a problem everywhere. There are a large array of gang activities all across the country with younger people reaching out to not only people of their same age, but reaching out to younger people.
San Jose police won't say where or when the alleged crimes occurred, but they do say they involved murders, weapons, and ammunition.
Kids become enamored with that lifestyle and become members of those organizations.
Experts say that emotional opening allows gang members to target children and teens as recruits to help expand their criminal reach.
Unfortunately, this happened in your community, and it's going to happen in another community this week somewhere else. It's what's going on right there, Jesse. Or what's going on now with these kids of these ages.
Police are imploring parents to keep a watchful eye over their children and their neighborhoods to lessen the influence of gangs and criminals.
It's not just a police matter, it's a community matter, it's a societal matter that is much bigger than the police department.
There we go, man. I was checking out this story and I was thinking to myself, I think these officers, I mean, this whole operation is slightly exaggerated. They're saying attempted murders, but we know attempted murder could just mean it can be vague. I don't really see any serious offenses. I mean, it's all relative, but for them to grandstand like this and to make this into a huge thing, I don't see it. I don't see the main problem here. The way they're articulating it, it just sounds like some teenage kids just got caught hustling. Maybe they got into a couple fights. And they said as young as 16. I thought he was gonna say as young as like 9 or 10.
Yeah, me too. I was gonna say 16, the worst ones. The ones out there gunning shit down. Yeah.
I expect to see 16 to 17-year-olds.
No doubt, no doubt. But at the same time, I'm like you, bro. It's highly exaggerated. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to discredit, the community for say wanting these guys off the street if they was selling drugs or having little shootouts or fights or things of that nature. You know what I mean? I understand that people that live in communities want to live safe and sound. But this wasn't no big old organized ring. This was a few dudes, man. That would probably, like you say, had a couple streets and had a couple pounds or a little bit of this or that, a few guns. Why they grandstand like this, I don't know. I know that there are bigger gangs than this in San Jose that's rocking and rolling. But maybe they just needed something to let the community know that they are, investigating. I don't know. The one thing I did catch is when the one guy said, man, it's happening everywhere, man, especially to this level. It's happening everywhere all across the country. So, you guys put out this big article like y'all just took down, like Al Capone or something. But, you got a few cats, man, that like you say, I'm not going to take away from, if they was putting in a little work, but at the same time, man, they wasn't doing it to where you had to grandstand like that.
Nah, man, it just kind of reminds me of the whole Mad Ronald thing, man. When they got there, they did a huge press conference with like 50 people in the room trying to say this guy was the ringleader, Mad Ronald, of this transnational gang that stretches from Los Angeles all the way to Atlanta, Georgia,
right?
Involved in all kind of crimes, including murders. They actually did mention murders in the indictment. They never said Mad Ronald was connected to any, but it was kind of misleading to talk about it in the same breath. And they ended up giving him a 5-year deal, which he'd be out in like 3. So, how serious really was his role if they're saying, hey, he's facing 20 to life and he ends up just doing 3.
Right. No doubt, and that's going to happen with some of these dudes right here, especially the juveniles, depending on, who's charged with what, But at the same time, like I say, maybe San Jose needed something to put out there to make it seem, to give let people know that they are investigating gangs, which I believe they're investigating gangs in every city, every state. I believe that they're putting packages together to, do these sweeps more and more often. And, this was going on, especially, I ain't gonna say especially, but, definitely in California.
Yeah, man, and I want to let the Streets of Scholars listeners know that if you know any youngsters that is dabbling with the streets or is thinking about dabbling with gangs or things of that sort, send them a link to this story, because even though these youngsters here were probably involved in some minor activity, they still getting pushed through the criminal justice system, and we want to try to avoid that for all our youngsters around the country. And maybe stories like this, maybe the good thing about a story like this is that a kid is looking at this and he's saying to himself, oh man, I went to high school or I went to junior high school with some of these dudes, man. I do not want to end up in the Santa Clara County Jail or any county jail in your jurisdiction. And maybe this does work or help as a deterrent for some kids that are 13, 14, 15 years old. So share this story and let others know that this is what's going to happen, because law enforcement ain't playing in all these small towns all across America, FG.
Hey, no doubt. And before we end up with on this topic, I like what the dude. Well, I ain't gonna say I like what he said, but I heard what he said. When he said, when some of these kids, man, just out here, some of them don't have a father at home. Some of them don't have a big brother to, show them, examples of, how to be a man. So what they do is they go out in the street and they connect with dudes, and they learn from each other on how to be a man. You know what I mean? Especially, like you say, coming up 13, 14 years old. They looking for guys, they looking for leadership, they looking for how to do what a man's supposed to do, and in the midst of that, you next thing you know, you look up, you in the gang, and it's a band of brothers. So when the negativity get to going in it, you rolling with it, even though that ain't even in your heart to just do all that. But these are your partners, these are your buddies, these are the people who you made friends, and at the end of the day, man, like you say, that guidance and leadership, from a man, a father, or uncle, a big brother, it goes a long way, man. So, if you got kids out there, man, that you're not tight with, you got nephews out there, you don't talk, tap in with them, man, see what's on their mind, man. Take them to lunch, man. Take them to breakfast, man, and just see where they head at. You'll be surprised that sometimes, man, a lot of these kids, Alex, they really just looking for guidance, bro.
Hey man, I used to speak to gang members at Culver City High School. I had a job there back in in late '90s, and I was a counselor. It was an unusual type of job, but the only people I spoke to were gang members, and I would speak to them 1 hour a week, every week for like a year, and they would sit in the room. It was about eight or nine kids, and I was forced to talk to them. And these kids would not want to listen. They wouldn't want to talk. One of the kids came into my meeting strapped, I'm smelling like weed. And I'm just sitting there just trying to have conversations with them saying, look, man, I go to college. I'm at USC. I know where you guys are from. I grew up in the same type of communities. I'm just giving them just advice.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're doing it, it doesn't seem like it's working. It doesn't seem like you're even having an impact. But then let me fast forward like 10 years later. I'm at my office and I'm getting a package delivered to me. And the guy opened, he's delivering the package. He says, hey, man, I used to go to Culver City High School. You was my counselor. And he was like, man, you really, really helped me out, man. And you gave me great advice and you had an impact on me. And I was sitting there saying to myself, I never even knew that I was reaching any of these youth, because when they're 16, when they're in high school, they play the role like they don't even care. But
Right, no doubt.
this dude who delivered my package one day, he actually said that I changed his life and I didn't even know it, man. It's crazy.
No doubt. It definitely can happen. So, that's that, man. That's what's up.
And I say that just to tell people, hey, you never know what kind of impact you're gonna have on someone, even though it doesn't seem or it doesn't appear that they're listening. But lastly, man, I wanted to tap in with the story, man. Out of Chicago, I'm sure everybody saw the shooting of the 14-year-old boy that he did on the guy that was assaulting his mom. And this is a great example of a story where as soon as it hits the media, you're getting one narrative, and then a few days later the narrative is changing.
Mm-hmm.
But initially the prosecutors tried to say this was a murder.
They did say it was they did say it was a murder. They arrested him for murder, and booked him for murder. Gave him $3 million bail, or gave her $3 million bail, and then the video started coming out. The video started surfacing, and from the research I was doing on it, I heard that the videos is really what helped them get exonerated, you know what I mean? And because without the video, man, it was just like what we thought we heard, you know what I mean? The lady in the store get into it, a guy called her son to come in there and blast the dude, you know what I mean? So, once the video surfaced, it was more clarity on what really happened. And they let her out, her and her son, they let them go, saying, that they didn't believe that they should be prosecuted. So I was all for that part, Alex, very much so.
No, a lot of people kind of felt like that from the very beginning, even before uh, the more videos came out. But I was surprised that there were some people that was like, "Oh, this woman needs to go to prison. She's a danger to her child. She's telling her son to do this, that, and the other." And it just goes to show you that when a story first hits the media, you really have no idea what's going on. Law enforcement, media are going to exaggerate the story. They're going to swing it in one direction. And then if you just be patient and let this story happened quickly, but sometimes you don't get the truth for like 6 months, a year. But in this one, within days, less than like a week later, less than a week later, we're getting a whole nother narrative. Did you find yourself going from one position to the next position, or you had the same views from the very beginning of the story?
No, I had like 5 different views, 5 different, different feelings about it, just to be honest with you. You know what I mean? For her to be in there, I don't know what the initial argument started over, you know what I mean? But for a woman to be in there arguing over a man who seems like he's violent, just to be 100, I would direct my daughter to not even get into that argument. If he wanted to go first, if he, if whatever the situation was, I would direct my daughter not even to be arguing with no man like that. Just to be honest with you, that was from the beginning. I'm not taking, making no excuses for the actions that he did. It's just, I seen 4 or 5 ways that this could have kind of been alleviated, you know what I mean? And so I had so many different opinions, but you got a clip or something for us?
Yeah, let me just play this real quick. This is a story that aired before the charges were dropped. So take a listen.
And a disturbing case unfolds in court. A mother accused of ordering her son to commit murder in a West Pullman restaurant. The mother and son are now charged, both of them. Elizabeth Matthews joins us now with more on this developing story. Elizabeth?
Yeah, Natalie, that mom who's accused of giving those shoot-to-kill orders is now being held on $3 million bail. Parts of that shooting were actually captured on this restaurant's surveillance video, which helped the witnesses identify the suspects to police. So this all happened Sunday night, police tell us, just after 11 o'clock, about 11:05 p.m. 35-year-old Carlisha Hood and her 14-year-old son arrived at the Maxwell Street restaurant on South Halstead at 117th. Hood went in for food. Her son waited in the car. Prosecutors say that's when she began arguing with this man, 32-year-old Jeremy Brown, who was also inside ordering food at the time. Hood began texting her son, who appeared in the doorway, hands in his pockets. A fight became physical between Hood and the victim. The victim was able to punch the woman once. That's when prosecutors say the boy pulled out a gun, fired a single shot to the victim's back, followed him outside, kept firing, striking him fatally twice in the back.
Once outside of the restaurant, while the co-defendant was still shooting at the victim, the defendant instructed her son, the co-defendant, to continue to shoot and kill the victim. Once the co-defendant finished shooting the victim, the defendant turned her focus towards witness 1. She began pointing at witness 1 and instructing her son to shoot her.
Prosecutors say the Hood even tried to get the gun from her son, but he pushed her away. No shots were fired at that witness, who is also the victim's girlfriend. Both mother and son facing murder charges. She's also charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. The teen boy also facing unlawful use and possession of a firearm. Both, we're told, did surrender themselves to police yesterday. We're also told that Hood, the woman charged in this, the mom charged in this, also had a FOID card herself and was licensed to conceal carry. Reporting live, Elizabeth Matthews, Fox 32, Chicago.
Okay, so if you just got this story here, if you only got this information here, it doesn't sound good for the mom and the son, right?
No doubt.
I mean, we didn't hear the woman, the news lady said shoot to kill. But it really was shoot to defend, right? The whole narrative was just pointing in one direction. You could tell the police and the prosecution were just looking at it in one shallow way, and it turns out that it wasn't true.
Well, I can't say one shallow way, because when he popped even the first time, remember what we talked about, and I told you I was gonna remember what dude said, and that I think that was the football player thing we was talking about when he say self-defense ends when he say murder begin when self-defense end, you know what I mean? So once he when chased him down in the parking lot, that's where I thought it they was gonna have a problem at, not that first shot. So you went chased him down, shot him some more. Now on the flip side, you hit my mama like that though. You know what I mean? So I'm not knocking what he did. I'm just saying how these people will play the game and charging you. You know, so I thought that's where they was gonna try to catch him up at. You chased him down in the parking lot and shot him again. I thought that's where he was gonna have, you know, the mom and the son was gonna have a problem at fighting the case, not the initial, you know, he blasted him in the restaurant.
Yeah, and there's nothing in that story about this woman. She has a valid carry conceal license. Her gun is completely legit, and there's nothing in that story about Illinois law says you have a right to use deadly force against force. And here's the
No
story.
doubt.
Here's the story after charges were dropped. Take a listen to this.
Topping our news here at 6 o'clock, just days after a mother was charged with texting her 14-year-old son to shoot a man at a fast food restaurant, Cook County prosecutors have now suddenly dismissed the first-degree murder charges against her. NBC5's Charlie Wojciechowski takes a look at new video that brought today's reversal in this case.
A fatal shooting at this West Pullman hot dog stand, now seen two ways.
Hey, get your food!
New video surfacing online this weekend showing what appears to be an attack on Carlisha Hood, an attack that is only stopped when her 14-year-old son opens fire. We are freezing the video at that point.
Let me just say everything that happened in this situation was terrible.
Former mayoral candidate Jamal Green was one of the first to share the video.
When this situation first uncovered, the media covered it as the mother directed her son to kill someone, in which everyone around the city of Chicago was like, oh my God, why would that mother do something like this?
This was the first video released by police as they were looking for two suspects in a fatal shooting here at 116th and Halstead. But Green says the second video tells a different story.
Folks all over the country said that this is a case of self-defense.
But the videos have created controversy about exactly what happened here and who was responsible. Today, Cook County's state's attorney cited new evidence in announcing the first-degree murder and contributing to the delinquency of a child charges against Hood would be dropped. Based upon the facts, evidence, and the law, we are unable to meet our burden of proof in the prosecution of these cases, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox said in a statement. A decision welcomed by patrons at Maxwell's.
Justice has been served.
It was that second video and the fact that it was shared on social media that Green says made the difference.
This wouldn't have happened without social media.
In the West
I'm gonna
Pullman
stop it
neighborhood.
there, and I want to say this, FG. They knew the camera. They knew all the camera angles when they arrested this lady. They just didn't release that first one because they didn't want public opinion to go against them. And I guess the prosecutor was looking at this video saying, "Well, there's no way I'm gonna be able to charge her with first degree murder. It's just not." This man, unfortunately, Jeremy Brown. He decided to take flight on a woman, man, and his son was there strapped, ready to defend his mama.
Yeah, he fired on her. He fired on her hard too, Alex. You know what I mean? I seen the thing on Instagram yesterday, man. You know, unfortunately, this dude lost his life, man. But they say he went in for a Philly cheesesteak and left with wings. You know what I mean?
It's not funny,
but
though, man. It's
no.
not funny.
Well, look, homie, you fire on my mama like that, though, man. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna just be honest with you, Alex. You know, he was filed for that all the way around. You know, he didn't slap her. He closed fist fired on her. You know what I mean? So even though, like I said, lost his life, it ain't funny, but I ain't gonna not. You know what I mean? You know, he damn near got what he deserved. I mean, just 100. You know what I mean? But this is what I checked out. Like I said, with so many things. You know, why is you arguing with this man and you see he's serious about some shit? You know what I mean? That's for one. So you know, your son come to the door. You know what I mean? And he got the pin. Now he 14. Now that's a whole nother situation, homie. You know, you call your 14, not your 16. It's a difference. Call your 14-year-old son to come in there with the pistol. He probably didn't think nothing like this was gonna happen at the moment. You know, I could tell how long it took him to get the gun out of the jacket.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, he struggled to get that thing out. You know what I mean? You know.
Hey, can you say this was his first rodeo?
I can, but this the problem that I have with it. This is what I wanted to speak on it. When something happens like this, sometimes it can trigger something that make it not your last rodeo. You know what I mean? You know, I hope this the kid can get counseling, homie, based on the next issue he get into. He won't be so quick to lay somebody down because he done did it before. That's one of the issues that I had with it. You know what I mean? You know, unfortunately, this dude killed a man at 14 years old. You know, and even though, you know, it was a self-defense for his mom, I get it. But it's the mental toll that it take on you. You know, as a 14, I done seen it take mental tolls on grown men. You know what I mean? So the mental tolls that it take on you as a 14-year-old, the dreams you may have, the thoughts you may go through, you know, the next time you get jumped and beat up in, you know, in the neighborhood or something, is you gonna go grab a pistol, man, and, you know, be like, you know, this is what I do, you know. So I'm hopefully he can get the right, you know, counseling, you know, in order to, you know, understand, man, that this was an unfortunate situation that happened and move on with his life. What I did hear though, that the rapper Nicki Minaj said if and when he decide to go for higher education past high school, financially she got it. You know what I mean? So, you know, if he could, you know, just take the opportunity, man, and keep a level head. Don't let this change him. I know it can and will in some degree, but if he can keep a level head, talking just to the kid part of it, you know what I mean? I hope this kid be all right after that.
Man, that's a very important point, that this boy definitely needs some counseling. He needs some treatment. And I hope that the mom, Carlisha Hood, is more concerned about the treatment that her son is going to need rather than trying to sue the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois she's trying to sue for unlawful prosecution. They never prosecuted her in the first place.
Right.
And I can understand that they're going to take you into custody for a couple of days. So I'm not sure if she really has a lawsuit. I think you was telling me that you heard that she's filing a lawsuit for damages.
No doubt, man. And I ain't gonna lie, I was disappointed. You know, just based on lady, they just let you walk on a body. You know, and this was sometimes people just don't get. I don't know. You know, I know people think different. But what do you mean unlawful detainment? What do you mean they twisted my arm when they took me into custody? What do you mean? You were a murder suspect at the time. A man did lose his life in an altercation with you. You know what I mean? So, you know, and they let you out. And sometimes people just don't see, you know, because it ain't like they can't find something else and double back on your ass and, you know, hit you with your manslaughter. You know what I mean? You know, and that's what people don't get. Sometimes in these situations, Alex, you just, hey, you take your W and you walk away. You know what I mean? You don't be seen, you don't be heard, you let it go. But you back in the press with this lawyer at the table, I'ma sue. Yeah, okay. You know what I mean? But like I say, that's just in my opinion. Some people can argue with me, but like I say, some people just don't get it, man.
Yeah, she's arguing emotional distress and unlawful prosecution. Well, there was never a prosecution. So and you know, if she found a lawyer that wants to file a frivolous lawsuit, that's what America's allowed. I've had a couple frivolous lawsuits filed against me, so you know, I hate these frivolous lawsuits. But hey, that's the way our system is designed, man. And we're gonna wrap it up right here, man. Let all the people know where they could tap in with you, man. You just posted some real dope content on FG Unleashed, right?
Yeah, no doubt. FG Unleashed on YouTube, man. Come over there, check me out. You know what I mean? Y'all hit that subscribe button, man. You know, hit that like button. You know, also I'm on Instagram at FGeneral1 on Instagram. Tap in. You know, that's what's up.
Yeah, and if you haven't checked out the video that FG posted on FG Unleashed on the Stanley Pitts funeral, man, go check that out. That was pretty dope. How you talked about all these cats that you knew back in the day when you was a youngster, and to see them all there doing, you know, everybody seems to be still doing well. People ain't dying from murder anymore. You know, they're dying from old age now. So
No doubt, you know, and that's a good thing, but just old age ain't what it used to be, so that's a bad thing, you know. And so yeah, man, you know, come check it out over there, man, you know. And I see this guy 85 imports in the comments say, but it still damages there, you know. And I don't know what kind, you know. I mean, like you say, you can file a frivolous lawsuit, but if you're gonna be awarded something for being, you know, arrested for a murder, then, you know, release be, you know, I don't see it. I just don't see it.
Well, yeah, there's damages there, but it's not damages that the state of Illinois or the city of Chicago created. So, yeah, there's no doubt damages. So tap in with me, Alex Alonso 101. Make sure you're checking out the YouTube channel, Street TV on YouTube. And thanks for listening to another fire episode of Streets and Scholars.